What happens if you don't forgive? Now, some of you are at the point you're like, I see what he's doing. He's trying to sell me on this forgiveness thing. I'm not sure I'm ready to buy. Why should I sign up for this lifestyle of forgiveness? Ephesians 4, the whole context is bitterness, forgiveness, unforgiveness. It says, be what? Angry. There's a good and a bad application of anger. Our culture likes to say, there's toxic emotions. No, there's emotions that are used in godly and ungodly ways. God gets angry, and there are some things that we need to get angry about. Somebody abuses a child. If you're angry, congratulations, you share God's heart. So anger can be a sin, but it's not always a sin. Be angry and do not sin. Don't let the emotion excuse the behavior that adds to the ungodliness. Do not let the sun go down in your anger. Their day started at night. So it's talking about dragging yesterday into tomorrow. Give no opportunity to the devil. When you're hurt, offended, wounded, abused, betrayed, you're vulnerable. Satan's like, they're in a very vulnerable place. Now's a good time to recruit them to join my team through bitterness and wrath. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. 4 things here. Number 1, if you choose not to forgive, the first thing you're inviting is bitterness. We don't always use the word bitterness. We'll use unforgiveness, disappointment, woundedness, brokenness, holding a grudge, being offended, or just plain old hurt. I'm not bitter, I'm just hurt. Synonym. Synonym. And let me say this, you're most likely to be bitter not because of the size of the offense, but your affection for the offender. The people you love and trust the most and bring most close to you, if they do a little thing, it's a big thing, because though it's not a big deal, they're a big deal. Someone that you're not close to can do something even worse, but the effects are not as deep because they're not as close. This means if someone is very close and does something very evil, that is a profoundly deep wound to forgive. And again, it's a moment and a process. Number 2, if you don't forgive, you will become emotionally unhealthy. One of our pastors, Jimmy Evans, he says, today's anger is not a problem. Yesterday's anger is a problem. If something happens and you don't deal with it, you take your anger and you carry it forth into your future. Today's anger is supposed to be dealt with today, because if we take today's anger into tomorrow, we'll be emotionally unhealthy, have lots of conflict, and then we'll be more bitter, and this starts a whole cycle of victimization and woe is meism, and I am a person who gets to say and do whatever the heck I want because of everything I've been through and how emotional I am. And it's like, okay, that's a lot of days that are compounded together. Let's deal with today's hurt today, tomorrow's hurt tomorrow, the next day's hurt on the next day. Let's not let it avalanche every day. Number 3, if you don't forgive, you're declaring war. This is literally spiritual warfare. When he says, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouth, out of the overflow of the heart, Jesus says, the mouth speaks. And what we do, because we feel like we're at war with them, what happens in war? Troop buildup. Well, we're going to go out and recruit and enlist a bunch of soldiers for our side. They're going to go out and recruit and enlist a bunch of soldiers for their side. It's escalation. It's an arms race. Let me tell you who they are. Let me tell you what they've done. Oh, let me give you my side of the story. No, you should take offense and side with me against them. I hate to say it, some of you grew up in families like that. Mom and dad were not one, and as a result, there was division that led open opportunity for the demonic. This is where whole families get involved. Well, whose side are you on? Jesus? Team forgiveness? then they both shoot you. Like Jesus. How many of you can literally think of a war that's happening? And there's pressure for you to join a side. There's two kinds of war. There's the hot war where we're yelling and screaming, and then there's the cold war where we're ignoring and abandoning. Sometimes it's the hot war, then the cold war. And what happens as well when there's war, there's unholy alliances. You're bitter, I'm bitter. Let's be bitter together. Let's be two barrels on a gun. The internet allows bitter people to find one another and form unholy alliances like no time in history. Never forget, years ago I was pastoring, and there was just a couple of bitter people, and guess what? They all found each other. Somebody asked me, they're like, that's crazy. They don't even go to the same service. Some at the time, they're not even the same campus. How did they meet? Because their demons know each other and introduce them. It's part of the war. Number 4, you open yourself up, if you don't forgive, to demonic torment. The context of Ephesians 4 is don't grieve the Holy Spirit and don't give the devil a foothold. When you're hurt, you're either going to invite the Holy Spirit or the unholy spirits. If you choose bitterness, you're choosing the unholy spirits, and the result is you're opening yourself up to torment. You're giving the devil a foothold that becomes a stronghold, that becomes a chokehold, that becomes a death hold. That's where he's going. There's a story that Jesus tells in Matthew 18 that illustrates this concept of torment, and part of it is absolutely connected to the demonic. To summarize quickly, he tells the story that there's a guy who owes, let's say, $1 million, big debt. He can't pay. He's upside down. He's going to be a slave, as will his family members. So he goes to the man that he owes the $1 million to and says, please forgive my debt. And the man says, I will. Your debt is forgiven. I'll pay, not make you pay me back. Forgiveness, not vengeance. This guy's excited. Best day ever. On his way home to tell the good news to his family, another guy approaches him who owes him, let's say, $1,000. And rather than forgiving that man, he says, you know what? I'm going to make you pay. I'm going to punish you. I'm going to pour out wrath on you and vengeance on you. Forgiven people should be forgiving people. Jesus has forgiven you for a lot more than he's asking you to forgive them. Their debt is the $1,000. Your debt is the $1 million. Ultimately, Jesus says that the man who was forgiven but not forgiving will be sentenced to jail and tormented by the jailer. Tormented is the word that Jesus uses. The jailer, most commentaries believe, is Satan. If you don't forgive, you're inviting Satan to come torment you. Satan's like, well, if you're going to make them pay, I'll make you pay. If there's vengeance for them, there'll be vengeance for you. And you need to see this when you're hurting because you're vulnerable to inviting the unholy spirits to come torment you rather than the Holy Spirit to heal you. That's why some of you can't stop thinking about it. That's why some of you can't stop talking about it. That's why some of you can't stop dreaming about it, because you're being tormented. Forgive, invite the Holy Spirit. Just as truth casts out lies and light casts out darkness, so forgiveness casts out bitterness. Here's a couple types of bitter people. The archaeologist. What does the archaeologist do? Let's dig up the past. They're always, you're like, well, I thought we buried it. No, we're digging it up again. Right? Remember 7 years ago? Some of you even have the date. It's March 13th, 4 a.m. We're going to dig it up. The case builder, I know you're evil. I just don't have the evidence, but I will find it. So I'm going to interview people. What have they said and done? I'll stalk you on social media. I'll build my case so then I can convene court and I can convict you. The negative narrative reporter, you're bad. Everything you say and do will be put back into the negative narrative. right? Well, I love you. You're just saying that so you can manipulate me. Well, I'd like us to have a good relationship. Yeah, you're trying to take advantage of me. Okay, there's no winning. Everything goes back into the negative. There is the bridge burner. You hurt me, I set the bridge on fire. Eventually, I burned all the bridges. I lived by myself on an island. There is the broken believer who has compounded pain. They get overly emotional because they got hurt here and they didn't heal. And so when this happens, it's complex hurt. It's compounded hurt. It's like their soul has a migraine and everything is amplified. And then there are those who take their bitterness and make it their identity. There's a gal named Naomi. Her name means sweet. In the book of Ruth, I preached some years ago, she changes her legal name to Mara, which means bitter. Imagine that. You go down to the Department of Motor Vehicles. Yeah, I need to change my driver's license. What's your name? My name is Sweetheart. Oh, well, Sweetheart, what'd you like to change your name to? Bitter. Bitter. That's who I am now. She moved to another country. She had a foolish husband. She had ungodly sons. The sons die. The husbands die. She's flat broke. She's left in a foreign country, and she's bitter, and she wears it. Okay? We don't want you to wear it. We don't want you to wear it. They are responsible for their sin. You are responsible for your sin of bitterness. I'll say it another way. Just because they hurt you doesn't mean that sinning against them is something that you have the right to do. And being bitter is sinning against those who sin against you. It's returning evil for evil. Last couple questions. What happens if you do forgive? Little good news. Here's the sales pitch, all right? Some of you are like, I can't forgive them. You can't. You're going to need a miracle. His name is the Holy Spirit. Ephesians 4:30-31. Do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God. When you're hurting, the Holy Spirit is off to the side like, invite me in, let me help. Okay, I want to forgive them. Holy Spirit's like, okay, we can do this. Satan's on the other side. Don't forgive them. That's where the battle is. That's where you need to choose to win your war. Do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. God's got a great plan for you. Let how much bitterness? All. What about that person? What about that thing? All. It's like cancer. Get rid of it before it destroys you. And if you don't, here's the cycle. Wrath, anger, clamor, slander, malice. When you are hurting, you make a decision to either pull hell up into your life or invite heaven down into your life. The culture we live in will one day be gone forever. Eternally, there will only be two cultures, heaven and hell. Heaven is a culture of forgiveness. Hell is a culture of unforgiveness. Everyone in heaven will be forgiven, because God does forgiveness. No one in hell will be forgiven. Satan and demons are never forgiven of anything and never forgiving of anyone. When you're hurt, you're making a decision. I'm pulling hell up or I'm inviting heaven down. That's what he's talking about with the ministry of the Holy Spirit, who always descends on believers. He comes down. What does this look like? I'll give you a quick case study. Who's writing this? For those of you who know, Paul. Was he a good guy? Real bad, dangerous religious terrorist. We see him in Acts 7, overseeing a mob of angry men, going out to persecute, harm, harass, arrest, murder Christians. He's a terrorist. There's one occasion where all the angry men lay their cloaks at his feet because he's their leader, and they go out to take rocks and throw them, stoning, putting to death a man named Stephen, who was an early church leader. Now, just kind of get the picture of Stephen, a mob of men throwing rocks at him. Right? He's bleeding, he's hurting, his bones are breaking, he's dying. And what does he pray? Father, don't hold this sin against them. Please forgive them. He's echoing Jesus from the cross. Who heard that? Paul did. He learned about the forgiveness of sin by his murderer forgiving him. Sometimes people don't know forgiveness, and the only way to teach them is to forgive them and then let God deal with them. And sometimes God will save them and use them to preach a message of forgiveness because they've been forgiven much. The Bible then says, as Stephen was dying, the unseen realm opened up. He got to glimpse into heaven. And he saw Jesus. Was Jesus sitting or standing in the vision? Standing. Every other image of Jesus ruling and reigning in his heavenly kingdom, he's seated. When your work is done, you sit down. Right? Right now, there's a lot of people that aren't at church because they're at football. What happens when a guy takes a dead pig, crosses a chalk line? What happens? They get out of their seats and they cheer. If you will forgive today, Jesus will get out of his seat and cheer for you. The story of Stephen is the unseen realm opens up, and as he's saying, I want them to be forgiven, Jesus gets off his throne and is like, good job, son. Forgive them. That's what we do. We do forgiveness. Get out of the way. Let me deal with them. Let me heal you. Welcome home, good and faithful servant. Let me go get Saul. I'll blind him, knock him to the ground, get him converted. He'll go to jail. It's going to stink for him, but he's going to preach grace. It's all going to work out in the end. Amen?